And I kind of wanted to start this in a way where if someone hadn't read it before, we could kind of give our endorsement. So if you guys were encouraging someone to check this out, how would you pitch it to
them? I'd probably start with telling them, if you've ever been interested in knowing the Empire's side of things, and not in a way like that their motivations, but knowing the people in the Empire, where they come from and how the galaxy sees like the Civil War and Order 66 and all of that stuff. It's a good book to read for that. I mean, a lot of people just from the outset who haven't read the books think that, the moral lines are drawn rather inexorably between, the good and the bad, and the galaxy sees the rebels and they're the good guys and Empire's the bad guys. Like, no, it's like there's a lot of like ambiguity here. Some planets don't know what's going on, and some planets are being fed propaganda, and then you have people who support the Empire, some people who look forward to seeing the TIE fighters, and it's a great way to see the perspective of just the galaxy at large on both sides.
Yeah. Anyone else have?
I'd say if you liked or loved the original trilogy, which really who doesn't? Some people like other trilogies more, but everyone has a special place in their heart for the original trilogy, and you want to see it from a different point of view. It beautifully told from a more grounded point of view. It's not like a huge space opera like the movies are. This book is for you. It's really good.
Yeah, I feel like I'd kind of pitch it as a behind the scenes of all those big events that we see throughout the original trilogy. It's from an actual human perspective, you know what I mean? You're not looking at it from a Jedi's point of view, but just someone who works for the Empire or is part of the rebellion.
Yeah, I agree.
No, go ahead.
I love kind of that additional point of view. I love, like, I forget when Thane's like talking about Luke and he's kind of just like over it, how other people see him. I think that's really refreshing, and I think Victoria said on the group chat how it like weaves in different parts of the story, but it definitely doesn't feel like it's tied down to the plot of like A New Hope or original. But you get just enough where you get that kind of outside perspective on the characters you really enjoy and the moments you really enjoy.
And Brooke and Ted, any thoughts? Nope. If not, that's cool.
Brooke, you're on mute. I see you're listening.
Sorry. Yep.
Yourself.
I really liked it. I don't want to say it like humanized like the evil side, but like people like you guys have said, kind of shows the background or the behind the scenes of like the people that are actually behind like the rebels and the Empire. And it just kind of, I felt like it showed that you're often like a product of your environment that you grow up in. It reminded me a lot. I just recently watched the movie Jojo Rabbit. If you haven't seen it, I highly suggest it. It's really good. But in the movie, the little boy is, it's in like Nazi Germany. The little boy has an imaginary friend, and his imaginary friend is Hitler. But it shows like just how much he doesn't actually know about what is really going on, because you can see Hitler is like smoking cigarettes and eating meat, and there's like all these things that like Hitler didn't actually do, like, so it just shows that he didn't really know what was really going on. So I think especially when the characters are younger, kind of growing up under the Empire's reign, they just didn't really know what was going on.
Yeah. And Ted?
Yeah, I would just agree with what other people have said about a fresh like perspective on the other side of what we've seen for years and years. Like we saw a bit in like Battlefront 2 with Iden Versio and stuff, but it was really refreshing because I'd never read a Star Wars book before, so it was just refreshing to like experience something like that for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I just think Star Wars books are amazing in general, and I want more people reading them.
I do
I
wanna
do
add-
kind of feel sorry for people who this is their first one, because you're going to read a few that just aren't going to measure up to Lost Stars.
That's
Started off strong.
that's
I do
just
want to
true.
add,
It's
building off of what Liz said about Luke Skywalker, there's also a view into like how the galaxy viewed the ideologies. Like it wasn't so prevalent where it was like everyone was like, oh, the Jedi and the Sith. Like, no, some people were just like, they exist. Like the Force is a thing. I don't believe in the Force sometimes. It's just like one of those like looming specters in the galaxy.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I know I had to explain to like my family members when I showed them Mandalorian that like the child using the Force and and Mando not really knowing what that is, it makes sense because it would have been propaganda. The Empire would have banned teaching about the Force because the Emperor wanted to be the only one. So
Yeah, it's really easy to forget that we have a different vantage point as the audience. The people in the world don't know any of this stuff, and so that's why. I mean, to me, I picture, because it's like the perfect Star Wars story, because it's a classic coming of age story, right? That's always relatable to everyone, and it touches on like the classism of their planet, and then they come up. We get to relive all these awesome Star Wars moments, and without it heavily relying on characters that we already know. You know, it's got your bit of romance. It's got your action. It's got Vader in it. It's got everything you want. But yeah, I mean, that's highly recommend everyone reads it. But yeah, we can move past the non-spoiler stuff and kind of get into the meat of everything. For you guys, we had this awesome, cast of characters, right? Because memorable characters are like the bread and butter. Obviously, Thane and Ciena, and as well as their classmates. Just what jumps out at you about all of them and their relationships, and who did you like and who did you hate? I mean, I'm sure we all hated Ved Foslo, but
no, I didn't hate him. I liked every single character, mostly because without even like spending way too long describing what they look like, you could still picture every single person that played a major role. Like, I knew what Jude looked like and talked like just by like just how Claudia wrote everything she said. She was like, oh yeah, she's the nerdy one, but kind of in an endearing way. And she talks probably matter of fact, and I could picture who would play her in a live action movie pretty much after a few scenes with her. And that's just incredible writing, honestly.
Yeah, I'd say Jude was probably the one that stood out to me the most before a certain point time in the book. But I mean, yeah, every single character was written beautifully, and it would be tough to single any one person out. Obviously, you have Thane and Ciena, but Nash. Even when you get to the latter half of the book and the characters like scale up to include rebels, it does a good job of like insulating itself and keeping the story relatively about those original characters that we met in the beginning.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, anybody else? Any favorite characters or notable? And it's okay to jump forward, because I mean, just the way that the story is written, what we see in the beginning are like pebbles in a pond, and we see how those ripple outward to who they end up being, and that's kind of what makes it amazing. I mean, for me, the first person that jumps out is Nash. When you meet Nash in the beginning, he loves Alderaan. Whenever Thane talks about Jellican, he's like, "Oh man, you don't even know. Like, I'm going to take you to Alderaan. You're going to see all this crazy stuff. It's the best." And hopefully, he believed that the point of the Empire was to make every place like Alderaan. Obviously, he was on the deck of the Death Star when Alderaan was no more. And I don't know, that moment was just like hit me in the feels. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, it's probably my favorite part of the book, even though it's the most tragic.
You
Because
can
the
feel it
movies never
too.
accept. Oh, sorry. You can go ahead, Connor.
Oh, that's okay. You can like feel that pain that everyone feels in that, and the shock in that moment when I was listening to it. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Because the movies never, except for Leia, really dived into like people weren't on Alderaan, but were from Alderaan, and had to hear about it blowing up, and had to think about literally every like most tragedies you hear about somewhere that happen in our world. You're like, oh, I hope my one cousin from over there is okay. But like you hear about a planet blowing up, it's like I know my one cousin from over there and all my cousins from over there are not okay.
Mhm.
And it must be heavy. And then like you're saying, Thane must, and then he had to hear all the people being like, I'm sorry your planet was full of traitors, you know. And it's
Yeah.
like that I can't imagine.
There was no Facebook check-in safe.
Yeah.
um, no, and especially, I mean, going off of what you just said, what do you think about the Imperial's rationalization of what happened? You know, like you joined the Empire, which is this great thing, and you're gonna, do all this stuff, and we're gonna stop these traitors. And I know that's, yeah, like you guys are saying, that's kind of the best part of the book is being on the side and where it touches the Star Wars universe. Um, but yeah, let's talk about that. This touches the main trilogy, and a little bit of the Force Awakens. With this guy behind me, but what did that mean to you guys? What is your favorite part where it kind of touches, the story? What jumps out at you guys? And we'll hit everyone. So we'll start with Justin.
Oh, well, that's easy. So the like first act of the book, like you said, was like pebbles in a pond. They were training, they were kids, they were growing closer, and then they finally grow pretty close. And it's like heartwarming. But then there's the moment they graduate, and my brain is still in this small pond. But the moment they graduate, she's like, I was assigned to I believe it's the executor first, or whichever one that not the executor.
It's the
second one.
Devastator.
The Devastator first, which I knew because I'm a nerd, was the one from the first movie. And then he's like, I'm on some top secret station that they won't even tell me the name of. And I exclaimed out loud, I was like, oh crap. Because like I realized that this like story and these characters were going to go on to bigger things than even my brain was ready for. And that's when the chapter ends, and I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah.
Brooke?
Well, I love when Wedge shows up. When I came out, I was so excited. But as far as like the timeline of the originals, I really think going back to Alderaan blowing up, I really feel like that hit me harder reading it than seeing it in the movie for the first time. I think watching the movie, I was like, wow, they really just blew a planet up. But then like the book, I guess just the way it was written made me really feel for how many people were actually living on that planet. And I also thought that it was kind of a turning point, kind of sort of, for Thane and Ciena at a little bit. So I think that it sparked what eventually would happen to Thane leaving or deserting or whatever you want to call it. I thought it was interesting that it was kind of different for Ciena, because I think that was the first time that she had really seen like, wow, how like evil the Empire can be. But I think with that happening and the Death Star getting exploded like not that much later, I think to that like it justified to her like, okay, maybe these people are really bad and we are really the ones doing the right thing. So I thought it was interesting how that dynamic was between the two characters.
Yeah, and it also gave vibes because they would be talking to each other, but hearing each other say different things.
Yeah.
And it actually reminded me a lot of Rey and Kylo Ren, where they were both saw themselves joining the other person, but like, no, you got to plan this out beforehand. Victoria?
Hi. So I joined a little late, but
Totally
um,
fine.
I think so. My vantage point on this, I was doing the audiobook, and so my auditory processing is the first time I've done an audiobook, but I heard Devastator, and my personal vantage point, I was like, this girl is about to be a young 20-something, and she's going to run into Darth Vader. What's going to happen, kind of thing. But I found that it was so in her perception of him. I found her perception of characters that we as an audience already have established perspectives of, like the Ozels, the Tarkins, the Piets. Like, she had these run-ins with these characters, but something about Darth Vader really struck me. And she was like talking about judging him for needing a life support system. And like, you can't judge someone that they have different needs. And like that I don't know, I guess you wouldn't think about how someone normal would just see this guy walking around and be like, okay, this is the Empire. And so that really struck me, just because I don't know, it was an interesting perspective of a universe that's already established. And then later in the series, when she compares herself to wearing the belt, and she says something about she is like him. Yeah. Like that common character, her arc of like the idea of like, just because you didn't do these things doesn't mean you weren't a part of these things. And so I thought that was very interesting, because she sees him and she sees the evil emanating off of him, unaware of like the Sith aspect. But then she compares herself after Endor to him. And so just seeing that full layout of character development through Sanda's eyes was really unreal, and it really hit pretty hard. But that was probably my take.
Awesome. And Connor?
Yeah, going off with what Victoria said, I also had that view. Just seeing Ciena pick up Vader when he was like in his time of weakness, I guess. She describes him as like cold. She can just feel it. And also the same thing when she sees Palpatine for the first time, like walk off the ship. Because I thought it was interesting how she described like the Empire never actually showed him like deformed, and he was just young and healthy. And when she saw him for the first time, she felt the evil and coldness. And I thought that was such a cool connection.
Yeah. And Liz, your thoughts on it?
I think one of my favorite scenes, well, just more so seeing the kind of Imperial Academy and how they work to indoctrinate people, how they work to turn the two against each other by sabotaging the canon, and just how that causes such a huge rift between them and kind of reinforces their views on the Empire. Thane's kind of skepticism, and then also Ciena's like being kind of confronted with how unfair it is, but also kind of pardoning some of her views, or the kind of the cognitive dissonance of like, they did this terrible thing, but I can't trust that they would do such a thing. It was really interesting.
Yeah, especially because she's like, yeah, they did it, but they didn't mean for it to get this bad. And you're like, but they did it. Come on.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Pep?
So I already mentioned it earlier, but obviously my favorite part, there's a couple of favorite parts, because it's been a long time since I've read this and I had to like skim through it to refresh. But obviously blowing up Alderaan, and then subsequently blowing up of the Death Star, and seeing when I think it was Ciena with Barriss at that point.
Were they picking up Vader at that moment?
I think Thane was still on the other.
Yeah, Thane was on the fake base, and she was on the ship, and they lost communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like,
even know what happened.
The narrative around that, not knowing if Ciena's alive, not knowing if Thane's alive, and not knowing if your friends like made it, because it was realistically a planet as well. And so on both sides of the spectrum, tragedy happened and people lost loved ones. And seeing that perspective when I first read it was just jarring, because on screen we're like, he blew up the Death Star, he used the Force.
You're like,
Boom,
yay!
take that, right? And so now you're like suddenly feeling for these characters, feeling for their loss and being empathetic, and just like, wow, I can't really like, you know, at certain points when you're reading, like, I can't really be 100% supportive of the rebellion or 100% in hate of the Empire. But I guess what my ultimate favorite scene would have to be the final scene. Well, not the final scene, but the scene on Jakku, when they have this mental, emotional, and physical fight in the bridge as the was it the executor at that point was falling onto Jakku, and he was trying to get her to escape with him, and she was trying to lay down her life for the Empire, and then like so much is said with little words as she's saying, I need to do this for my sense of duty, and he's like, they don't deserve you, and like that was just a hugely powerful scene, and probably like the one we deserve most to be adapted to film, like that scene alone, and that was just breathtaking.
Yeah, whew. Sorry, everything you said hits me hard on a bunch of different different levels. You know, I'll come back to the later one, you know, later. But when the Death Star blows up, and to us, it's this visual spectacle. It's boom, it's explosion. We know they didn't know what happened. All of their sensors, all of their things just went quiet. This thing was impossible to blow up. So what's happening? You know, and that having that whole scene play out, because it was a while before they figured out, before everyone knew, what would actually happen. And that was really cool.
And then of course
Ted?
the higher ups knew, and they wouldn't tell anyone under.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all part of the plan.
I completely agree. Just any scenes where it really humanized and added like development to the Empire, and it almost made you feel guilty when you're like thinking about going back and watching the originals. It was like having this almost empathy for the not naive, because like that's what they grew up with, but like the people involved with the Empire, you could see why they made the decisions they made, and it just added a whole another level of emotion to that era for me.
Yeah. And Rids, do you have any thoughts? Ridian?
Yeah. My favorite scene was when Thane got the Mighty Oak Apocalypse out of the storm, I think it was, because it just felt like real like Star Wars to me, because it was like Han Solo, and it was like a witty, cocky pilot and a Wookiee flying a weird named ship, and I think it was kind of cool. And then when they met Wedge, that was fun as well, when he joined the rebellion and he said he wouldn't, because like he had so much doubt, and he went from like a kid who really wanted to join the Empire to then leaving and joining the rebellion, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, because he swore up and down that he wasn't going to do that. Also, you know, just a shout out to Logara. Logara's awesome.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
It was so cool. But yeah, and I love, because there's so many places where now when we rewatch the movies, we'll see all these other little tiny connections, like Ciena being there when they capture the Tanavi 4, and them trying to avoid getting, you know, recruited to go down to Tatooine and stuff like. So that stuff is funny to me. Once Thane gets to Hoth, and he's like, God, this place sucks. And you know, and him having to, we get to see Dak there again, and like it just makes me smile. But drunk Thane being led around the Hoth base by a mysterious woman who turns out to be Mon Mothma is is one of my favorite parts because it
That
shows
was on the
you.
Moncala ship, though, right? Not the base. They had already retreated, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
why he was drunk. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. But it shows you the difference between the two, where Mon Mothma, as the leader, cares about each individual soldier because the soldiers make up the thing, versus the Empire, where the thing is the thing and soldiers are expendable. And then that immediately made me think of Rebels, when Callus and Zeb get trapped on the snow planet, and Zeb gets rescued and Callus gets rescued, but no one cares. You know, kind of had the same type of vibes. But yeah, since we're talking about like all these connections, real quick, let's hit the cameos, because we actually have a bunch of cameos in here. You know, obviously Vader. I loved all the Tarkin cameos.
Oh yeah, I was going to bring that up because of what Ted said. Because
Yeah.
I think choosing Tarkin to be the first like tie to the movies was a huge deal, because he's not necessarily a bad dude at the end of the day. He thinks what he's doing is right. At least he's no Sidious, you know. And like he's basically the Empire's Mon Mothma at that point. He inspired those two. He, you know, and then Ciena getting to see him again, Ciena, and like being like a little schoolgirl excited is just like, it was honestly a little heartwarming, even though I know I don't like Tarkin as a person.
And the fact that he remembered her. Oh, the kids, like it was like such a warm, like grandpa like moment, you know. And you're like, but that's Tarkin.
Yeah.
And he's such a character too.
I feel like
Vader,
at some points. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it was really quick. Like Vader, like he commands a presence, and because of his portrayals in the movie, he's almost a caricature. So you knew exactly how he was talking when you heard his voice in the book. You know, so it was nice. But that was all I was gonna say.
For me, at certain points and different points of the book, it actually felt like we were, it was propaganda itself, because on the Imperial side, yeah, we get to put faces to troopers and faces to pilots, but seeing Tarkin have that interaction with them when they were young, inspiring people to become pilots, it's like, oh, you're only just seeing the good side of that guy and the good side of these people, right? And so it feels like while you're experiencing their point of view and that side of the war, you're like, oh crap, like it's kind of like propaganda. You're just seeing all of the good on that side. And so I thought that was pretty clever how Claudia did that.
Yeah. And especially if you've lived it, you never saw the movies, and all you saw was kind old Grandpa Tarkin saved you from a fight when you were little, encouraged you just now. You're gonna love him. You're gonna love the Empire more, you know. Go ahead, Brooke.
Oh, I was about to say, it kind of reminds me, someone brought up Jojo Rabbit, and just like, yeah, that kind of warm figure you see as a kid is like very different from the reality. And yeah, just thinking of like the horrors of Tarkin doctrine, and just like the idea of, yeah, we can use the Death Star to like destroy entire planets to keep people in line. But if you see like the human being, it's not as horrible. Anyway,
Yeah, that's so good. And then on top, you know, keep going. There is, like I said, Mon Mothma, Leia, also Piet, Wedge, Dak, Generals Riken and Nadine. How about Brooke? Any cameos jump out at you? Oh, you mentioned Wedge, but yeah.
Yeah, Wedge just made me really happy because I feel like I wanted to see him more in the movies, so it just gives like at least another little layer to his character.
Yeah,
I
feel like we need more Wedge content just in general. I love the
Oh.
X-Wing books, but his parts in the Aftermath trilogy are great and kind of sad, but it ends up good for him. Connor?
Yeah, I'd say the Leia references when we see her at the ball, and then when they're talking about her when they're capturing the Tantive 4. And I forget who said it, but they're like, sorry about your princess. And that kind of hit me, because you know, like from our perspective that she's doing good, but then
She's our princess.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, that reference was is the one that intrigued me the most.
Kendi said that.
Yeah. And Victoria, I know the order changed. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So I love Piet. I just did a 5-part or 4-part video on that man. I love him. So the first time we see him as a junior officer, and Tarkin mentions, see Piet, sometimes we use the snare, but oftentimes it's the lore. And so like you reading it as an adult know that he's kind of using them as a teaching tool. Like he's like, all right, little kids, come to the Empire, being nice Grandpa Tarkin. But seeing that kind of manifest within Piet's personal character development later, and he's always a pleaser. He's not the Imperial that's like undermining people. He's the one that's like, I'm going to do my job and I'm doing it well. And so I don't know. I loved that cameo because it does kind of expand upon him just a little bit. And like, I mean, his character was designed for you to begin to start having empathy for the Empire, like initially in the original trilogy, because you're like, Piet's not a bad guy. And so just seeing that kind of manifest in a larger scale was really, really beautiful. So that cameo was really powerful to me. But the ship cameos were really also powerful. So moving in Cyanna's journey from the Devastator to the Executor and then to her own ship, the Inflictor, I was like, wow, like the Inflictor, you hear, Devastator create devastation. You hear Executor, and then Inflictor. That's a little bit more imposing, like something was imposed unwelcome, like something imposed on you in a way. And so I think that it kind of showcases how the Empire was imposed on her. And so, I don't know, I really liked the ship cameos and then the creating of the Inflictor, and then in your beautiful background, seeing the Inflictor there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
I hate to interrupt, but I love that as well, because like in Force Awakens, it's just a set piece. And
Yeah.
you're looking at it and there's a story, and then when you read this book at the end, you get the story of the Inflictor and what happened, and it's way more than you thought it would be just watching Force Awakens.
I mean, I feel the moisture in the back of my eyes anytime I think of the scene of Thane, especially because way back in the school, they asked, hey, if the enemies had basically won, we need to scuttle this, how would you do it? And she's like, the captain's word message, and that requires the captain goes down with the ship, and then that just billows through, and it gets me in the back eyes just thinking of Thane on the outside of that door, knowing she's in there trying to get in. Whew. Anyways, Ted?
I think the cameo that I was most aware of and like thinking about it, like took a toll on me, was watching Tarkin like act like that was almost really uncomfortable. Like I was like, I don't know, it was, you wanted to sort of like see him as this nice sort of like granddad type guy, but when you knew who he was, and then like it was just so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And Sawyer, I know you didn't finish, but I know you got bits of it. Any of those cameos?
I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't have a chance. I got like through the prologue and then that was it. I'm so sorry. I wanted to read it so bad, but I had already, it's like the 3rd week of school and I already had a test. I have another test next week. It's a lot. I'll read the next one, I promise.
Yeah, no worries. Well, we're still happy to have you here. Kind of switch around, but Radian, your favorite cameo?
Piet. I just like I've heard his name before, but I didn't really know that it was the guy in like the movies, and then I went to watch Empire Strikes Back because it was in cinema for some 40th anniversary, and then I was like, wait, that's the guy in the book, and it was kind of cool because he was like, because he wasn't like somebody said like a bad guy. He was a nice, but he was kind of like a nice person. Like he was fighting a bad war, but he was like a good guy. And like he needs his own book.
Oh yeah, wow!
I'd read a Piet book.
Mm.
Heck yeah, I've never even considered that, but definitely. And it's cool because you can feel like the characters of this book are just off screen. You know what I mean? Like they're just off screen when you watch the movie, but they're right there. But yeah, I mean, we talked about the cameos. Let's jump into our.
We can't forget
I had a
Admiral
cameo.
Akbar. Admiral Akbar.
Oh
We
yeah,
can't leave him out.
I will
Yeah, he was there.
as
have a
well as
small
how
cameo to
uncomfy
mention.
it is to be on a Mon Cala ship because no one
Yeah.
talks about that.
And it gave I'll give one thing. It gave so much weight to like Mon Cala like put their navy towards the rebellion. You know, they put so many resources, and then it turns that moment that to us is a meme. You know, it's a trap, and then they blow up. It actually gives it weight because Thane was on that ship for a bit. He lived on that ship, and then the Death Star turns its lasers on it and it blows the whole thing up in the middle of a battle, and you actually feel some weight instead of it kind of being a meme like it is to us.
And
So I have one cameo to add, and it's lighter in heart and nature. Just when Thane's in the rebellion and they're fighting the Battle of Hoth, and you see him, you know, doing his piloting stuff and being an awesome pilot, then you hear out of the comlink, he just took one down with the tow cable, and I'm like, fucking Luke. Sorry for cursing, pardon my French, but like, you knew that was Luke, and he had just inspired so many more pilots to be like, we can do this with the tow cables. That was an awesome cameo.
And things like, oh yeah, I know, because the joints are weak and stuff. And like, yeah, it just adds to it.
Even if
Victoria,
he knew, right? He knew the weaknesses of these things and was like providing his little take on it, coming from where he was. But like Luke, he's like, I got this.
So this is not a lighthearted cameo. It's Kendall Ozzel. We all know how I feel about Kendall Ozzel. But when Sienna makes him just like a footnote, like, oh, he's not there anymore. Okay. Like, I just love that. Like, she calls him Captain P at a time on the timeline that he would have already been promoted to Admiral, and then he corrects her in a later scene, and I just lost my mind. It was so funny to me. Just so good.
Where you knew he held on to that for a long time, and he's like, when I see her, I will correct her.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's try to think. Just a couple other notable things that not cameos that kind of apply to before the connections, but we also have Thane was the one that found Dakar, which will become a resistance base in the future. Right, that's a place that they were looking at, so that was cool. As well as how the trap for the second Death Star was laid out, how they let a pilot go, and also that scene hits me in the feels, especially after the Hoth, where he realizes Sienna could be in any of these ships, and that future scene. Whew. But yeah, on that topic, let's get to our main characters, their relationship. Their whole thing, and just our feelings about them, how they grew up together and their relationship overall, and why they are my favorite Star Wars ship. I think people in Star Wars don't usually have healthy relationships.
Yeah.
Now that I think of that. I'm going to start with Connor on this one, actually.
Well, I think it was perfect. It's almost like, well, I guess they talk about it like the Force was bringing them together, and it's like they always somehow ended up together, whether it was on the last ship back at Jellucan. I thought it was perfect because you always knew they were going to end up somehow in the end, and that last scene was just perfect.
Yeah. And then go to Ted.
Yeah, it's just we've seen loads of relationships in like nearly every Star Wars film, but I've not read any other books. But it was nice to see something that felt like so organic and believable, and it was just while reading it, I was almost like rooting for them, and it's different to how I felt about like Anakin and Padme or Han and Leia and stuff, in the sense that I was really like confused about where it would go and like not really sure, but it felt really natural and organic, and I thought it was really well written.
Yeah, especially when they're kids at the academy, and then they're separated a little bit, and then Thane's like, "Oh damn, I never noticed this before." Like,
Oh
yeah.
That's that paneled out in the manga is so good. I took pictures of it.
Yeah. Brooke?
I thought it was kind of funny, like reading the first part of the book where they're like growing up and then going through the academy. I feel like you could almost like put them in like a high school like romantic comedy, and it would kind of like fit those tropes the way like the story goes, but then once they leave and graduate, it kind of very like diverts from that. So I was happy to see, because I was like, I wasn't sure where the story was going reading like up through those parts. And then so it really takes off. I thought it was really interesting that they were like, there's a reason that we like gave you all this backstory on their characters and their relationship. So I thought that was cool. Yeah.
And how that backstory really does draw a through line throughout their entire lives, of especially with Ciena's loyalty. Justin?
Oh boy, I could talk about their relationship for hours. You couldn't. It's so, like, somebody used the word organic. It's really good, and somebody else said, it could be a romantic comedy in the beginning, and it's like, but all of it, instead of getting mad at either of them, sometimes I got mad at them, but only for like 2 seconds, because every single choice they made, even if it was a bad one, you could relate to. And just the way they grew so close that, I don't know, someone mentioned Hoth, like when she knew it was him just by the way he flew between the thing's legs, it really hits, because it's like, yeah, when you know someone that good, and early on when they're like both in denial, it's easy to get frustrated with something like that. But especially with Thane, I related to him a lot. Like, he was kind of spitefully not admitting that he loved her because of the classism back where he came from. Like, he didn't want to take pity on her. He didn't want to be her white knight. He wanted to support her as a woman and a officer of the Empire. And then he realized he could do that and love her in the moments when, the Death Star blew up and they thought each other was dead. They were like, no, we can't live without each other. And, that's when they kind of made their relationship official, but that's when everything fell apart for kind of both of them. And so we follow that, and I don't know. That's all I'll say for now. Like I said, I could talk about this for hours.
And Liz? She might be disconnecting. Let's go to Victoria.
As Ted mentioned, they were.
I think one of the most heartbreaking. No, tell me.
Sorry, Liz, you're cutting in and out.
No. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll try to make this short because my internet's bad. I think the most refreshing but also really heartbreaking part is that end scene. I feel like we really rarely get to see characters reconcile, but like Luke and Vader and Ben and Rey, it's always like someone dies before they really get to grapple with them being on opposite sides. And it's really heartbreaking seeing the scene with the jail at the very end. But it's really nice that they addressed that and kind of gave us finally what that looks like moving forward in that relationship. So.
Yeah, definitely. And Victoria?
I was just going to comment on how, yes, it was very organic, but it wasn't easy. And I appreciated that, that it feels natural, yet the same time there was a lot of friction caused by a number of things on a number of different facets, on a number of different levels. So I really appreciated that. And I thought it made for a complex, really good relationship. I don't know what to say other than that.
Yeah. And Ritz?
I found it really funny how they were like, "Oh, this is the last time I'm gonna see you," and then they see them like a year later, and they did it for like 5 times. And I kind of hope Nash would go with Sienna in the end. I don't know why, because like he was there the whole time. He was always loyal, and then like Thane, although like he didn't always have a choice, like Thane would like leave and like come back, but then Nash was like always there in like the Imperial Academies and stuff. I don't know why. Nash is my favorite.
That's an interesting take. I haven't thought of that before, but I like it. And Pep?
I mean, echoing a lot of what everyone has already said, seeing them grow up together, having that kind of dynamic throughout the academy, seeing them around friends who's like egging each other on, is like, wow, Thane looks good today, right? And then Sienna's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't see him that way. And then on the opposite side, Thane kind of like, I guess that ball that they went to, he was just like awestruck with seeing Sienna in that way, and just that whole relationship growing from there, constantly acknowledging that they have something, they have a connection, they can't do anything about it because of the Empire, and then when they do something about it, things go way downhill, and they're on opposite sides, and they're still in this like quasi relationship, except now they're both looking out for each other on the field of battle, and like trying to contend with doing their duty, killing the enemy, but also like not like hoping they're not going to see each other and take each other out, or like one kill the other. And I liked how there was like a lot of like wandering thoughts of like maybe it would be best to be taken out by them, like dying in that way. And a lot of the relationship kind of had fragmented concepts of Romeo and Juliet, and that was tragic in and of itself. So I agree with you. It is probably one of my favorite ships in Star Wars as well.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that they loved each other before they knew what love was, and as things progressed, obviously things fell apart. They had different goals, or headed in different directions. Timing was bad, but overall, they still showed that love. And when Thane shows up while Sienna's mom is on trial, whew, yeah, I mean it hits me.
Yeah, that was relationship goals right there.
Yeah, I'll extrapolate on that moment because that's what I've been thinking this whole time. That moment really encapsulates because they fly together. That was their connection from the beginning, flying together. And then they go to their special cave and they start arguing because they're on different sides of this war. She's mad at him, he's mad at her. But then, it just devolves into a loving embrace. And it basically, they both told each other, I hate what you're doing, but I'll always love you. And, like you just said, that's a relationship goal,
Yeah.
Onions, Brandon.
Listen.
Did I miss anyone? I apologize. Whenever someone's connection cuts in and out, you shift spots in my thing, so it's hard to keep track of. But did I miss anyone?
Ted, maybe, I think.
No, I said
You went first, I think.
Okay, perfect.
Oh.
Perfect. Question. I have a question for everyone, right? And I understand that, especially rereading this book right now, there's a bunch of funny things to me, like they're in Corona Squad, and like,
oh no, I didn't even think.
There's like, I don't know, just a bunch of like things that make me chuckle. And obviously, this, is not a political discussion. but there are ramifications in the story that kind of make you question things of, how far is too far. Like, we know that, destroying Alderaan is a bad thing, but, if you live here in the US, we dropped atomic bombs on Japan. Is that okay? Is that, aren't those two things similar? And before you start, I actually really love what Kendi says, because Thane still loves Ciena and is like shocked that she hasn't come and joined. And Thane tells her, like, hey, we were all at the academy together. Good people. There are good people there serving the Empire. And then I'll read the quote. Kendi says, good people can start serving the Empire, but if they stay, they stop being good people. You do one thing you thought you'd never do, follow one order that makes you feel sick inside, and you tell yourself, this is the only time. This is an exception. This isn't the way it's going to be. But you keep going. You make one more compromise than another, and by the time you realize what the Empire really is, you're almost too far down that road to turn back. And it gave me some goosebumps.
That makes me think about the quote that the new Avengers game actually came out with. Kamala hears from her dad, good isn't the thing you are, it's the thing you do.
Yeah. Oh man, if anyone plays Avengers, I'll play with you. So I play on PS4, but that's besides the point. But yeah, thoughts on, is the Empire truly bad, or is it just run by bad people? Can good people serve the Empire? Just hopefully we don't get heated here, but I'm curious on your guys's thoughts. And for this one, I will start with Brooke.
Okay. I also like that quote that Kendi says, and I kind of agree with it to an extent. I found myself kind of relating to Thane a lot throughout the book, just because I kind of talked about it earlier about how you could become like a product of your environment. So he grew up in the time of the Empire. He went to school to be in the Empire, like working for the Empire, but he was able to like see through the cracks in the glass, and was able to like come out on the other side doing what he thought was best after he saw like what really was going on. So I kind of related to that, just growing up in like a more kind of conservative area. It's hard to see through that when you've never seen what else there is, I guess. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that I took away from that. So I think I agree with that quote that you can see through it and, get out of it. You can still, I guess, be considered good, but then if you decide to stick with it, but it's also hard because I don't necessarily see Ciena as bad either. So it's tough to make that decision.
Yeah. And sorry, I know you haven't read the book, but based off the quote I just said, how do you think? If what you're serving is bad, can you serve it and still be good?
I mean, that's a really tough question. I find it kind of difficult to not think about the real world when you ask a question like that. Because speaking in Star Wars terms, like we all know that I do the whole I'm a Sith Lord type thing, and like a lot of people want to resonate with the Empire, and they don't really think about like what that really means and what the Empire has done. And there's a lot of comparisons to what's going on in the real world, especially like you said, the US drops the bombs on Japan. Like that's especially with World War II, there's a lot of comparisons there. But I think like the second part of the question, I think this is kind of something I talk about a lot with politics, and I think it's really unfair to sit here and judge someone for like Brooke said, there are people who grew up only knowing that. And so, yeah, I totally think there's good people on all sides, and there's a lot of people who just haven't been exposed to the right information or, the whole picture. So, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, very good. And Pep?
I think one of my favorite, actually no, the most favorite thing about this book, and I guess what I love about Claudia Gray, is that your moral compass is going like this the entire time. And so in order to reconcile with that with my own moral compass, I kind of like dilute it into like larger abstract concepts. And so, I mean, the machine of the empire led by the emperor is evil, but there are good people in it who have good intentions, and they're just like following orders. And the tragedy that comes with every war is that there are people on both sides who are fighting for what they believe in, doing their jobs, following orders, and those people die in the line of duty. And it's difficult to kind of proselytize about individuals have the right of it, or if like either side is on the right of it. So I think to answer your question, the abstract concept of the empire is evil, but the people of the galaxy contending with their environments and how to live their lives are good people.
Yeah. I mean, those damn rebels killed Jude, and like,
Yeah,
I love Jude so much.
I did
Yeah.
too.
Victoria? You're muted.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the quotes that you both shared really encapsulate really what better than what I could say. But there is something that this book reminded me of when I was reading it, because I'm currently doing research on swing dance. We've talked about swing dance before, but there's a movie and it's called Swing Kids, and
Such a good movie.
it is such a good movie. And Arvid is really weighed down with being a part of something evil, and he mentions before his death that he doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. He doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. And they, ask him to elaborate, and he says, just because you're not doing it doesn't mean you're not a part of it. And so what I would say to this question, and what I had to take breaks during this book, I must admit. I had to press pause, turn on some Fleetwood Mac, take a deep breath, and then come back. But I would say to this is who's benefiting from the way that you're living your life. So I don't think good is a blank term. I think you can be good on certain levels and facets, and be bad on certain levels and facets. So I don't think it's a condition that is either or. So I would is benefiting from the way you're living your life, who is like every choice made, who benefited from that. And so I think that there's a lot to be said about Sienna being a good person that is conditionally choosing bad benefit. And maybe, I don't think good people and bad people exist, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's a bigger question than I'm ready for. But I guess really, I don't think good and bad inherently is a blanket term, because you need to think each decision, each action, each portrayal, each thought, like how is the way you're thinking, who is that benefiting? Like, is it contributing to the oppression or the disenfranchisement of another person? Even just the way you think. So I don't know. There's a lot to be said about there's no good or bad, though it would be incredibly amazing if we had the evil people look like this, and like they have like the vampire cape going ha ha ha, I'm evil. Like that would be great. And the good people were wearing this Glinda the Good Witch. You know, like, it would be great if it could be, like, I don't think that good and bad can be compartmentalized as easily. But to the Kendi quote, something that my mom would always say when I was growing up is, it's like hedges. You know, you're cutting down more and more hedges, and what can be, what is seeing in, what can you see out. So like if your hedge is built and you start cutting little by little by little, you're exposed, and you're exposing bad. And so I don't know. I think I would say I don't think there's an inherent blanket term for good if you're making decisions that don't contribute to the betterment of others.
Absolutely. Plato's allegory of the cave comes to mind from that's what I was thinking while you were talking. But awesome. I love it. Liz?
I think, I think one of the most stunning things about the book is just seeing Sienna justify all of the things that happen first, at the academy with the canons, and then later Alderaan, of course, which is huge, but then also her mom being on trial. And it becomes, I just, you see that today in politics, how people, the worse and worse it gets, the more people work to justify and really get entrenched in their positions. So I thought that was really interesting. And I agree with the quote in that, she kept getting exposed to the reality of the empire, but she kept denying it because and I understand, coming from her background, loyalty is so prized, but it's very frustrating just seeing that again and again.
Yeah.
The rationalization.
Yeah, as well as the juxtaposition between her position and Nash's position, where Nash it was, I have nothing left but the empire. So they better be right. You know, if everyone on my planet died and we lose, they all died for nothing. And
that's a really like interesting metamorphosis too, going from seeing him grieve and mourn and being like stoic and just detached from everything and then later when he's just like the consummate freaking Imperial pilot and just telling Sienna get on with life and kill rebels. You know, that was epiphany, I guess.
Yeah, get money, kill rebels, you know. Connor?
Going off what has been said previously, there's levels to this, and depending on your perspective, both the rebellion or the empire could be bad. Like I'm reading the first Aftermath book right now, and I remember there's a scene where it's like the New Republic, and there's this protester protesting the New Republic because the empire left his planet and there's like no clean food, water, and there's like bandits like taking over the whole town, and there's like they're oppressed now. And one of the things that the empire did was create order, and depending on how you view that order, it's like tyrannical or whatever, but like he talked about like there's no food, no water, and we need help. So it just makes you think that there's different levels and perspectives to the bad and good guys.
Yeah, like that's like the Vader Dark Visions comic where I think it's Dark Visions, where he saves that planet from that monster, and so they view him as this shining knight of like, you saved my planet. You know, it's like it's very interesting, Connor. Sorry.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective. Ted?
I think when you look at people's like decision making and stuff, I think one of the important things you have to realize is like everyone's sort of the hero of their own story, and most times when you're making a decision, like you may not be thinking it consciously, but subconsciously, 9 times out of 10, you'll make the decision that benefits you as a person. And if I was living in that like an empire era, and I had to make a decision about joining the empire to keep my family safe or to like ensure like the people around me were safe, I think that would be a no-brainer in terms of it would be difficult to live with the consequences of being on the side that have destroyed a planet or done bad things. But when you come down to the more important things, it's hard to see why you would choose another option when faced with like how difficult of a choices they have to make. And it's the same on the other side, I think, with the resistance and like the rebel. Sorry, yeah. So everybody's the hero of their own story is what I'd sort of base their decision making on.
Yeah, it's like, how do you turn your back on everything that you have ever known? It's tough, but yeah, and that's what I love about Star Wars is on the surface, it's a power fantasy about good and evil. And then once you go past that first layer, you're like, oh no, this is really complex. It's like onions. It's got layers, and the more you cut, the more you cry. So, Riz, your thoughts on it?
To answer your question, if like the Empire is good or bad, I think it's like half and half. Because like the people who have more authority, like the people in charge, are like most likely to be a bit evil. But then like the people, like the majority of people who don't have as much charge, like who aren't as much charge, like like the majority of them are good. Like a lot of the Imperials that we've seen have been maybe a bit like evil or naive on the outside. Like in the inside, they're like good, like Callus and like Piet and Sienna and all the characters in the book, like all the kids who grew up in the academy, they all good. They thought they were fighting a good war, and they thought they were part of something good. And I think, yeah, I think like that they were fighting a bad war, but then they were good people who like. But the longer they stay in it, the more they turn evil, like Nash.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because what it breaks down to is who decides what is good. Everything Sienna did was good to the Empire. You know, who decides, and it comes down to the morality of whether or not your thoughts on good should be imposed on others. And I know it's deep, and it really comes down. Well, sorry, I won't go on. Justin, last but certainly not least.
This one's rough, and like it's Brooker. Somebody said it's hard to not put it into real world terms, but I'll try. I was gonna bring up that quote if you weren't, because it was really good, but it's it's hard to agree with it 100%, because Thane stood by while a planet blew up. He didn't decide to desert until he saw slavery taking place on a planet. We're more than the sum of our bad decisions, and that's, how many missions did Finn stand by and not try and stop before he was given an order that he felt like he didn't want to do because it felt wrong? We, at the end of Fallen Order, without spoilers, and this is a recurring theme in Star Wars in general. It's like the darkness is always there. We choose to fight it or feed it every day,
Yeah.
And Thane chose to fight it, and technically so did Sienna. And near the end of the book, when she's still serving the Empire, even after the second Death Star blew up, even after the Empire's technically on its last limbs, and she could have ran away, she chose to stay to try and be the good within that evil machine, like Pep said, and it wore her down. Instead of turning her evil like the dark side does to some people, it made her lose her will to live. And Thane was the only light that came in and saved her from that, because he chose to serve the light. So but knew that she was still good deep down. So I don't
Yeah.
know. I could pontificate for a while, but that's that final bit, and it was, yeah, this is definitely what I would want to say. That final bit where Sienna's still, she's trying to do good still in the Empire, and it's wearing her down. I wanted to be mad at her, but every time I tried, I could only for about a few seconds, because everyone reading this book would want to think that they're Thane, including me. I identify with him. But there are several situations where I couldn't honestly tell you that I wouldn't be in Sienna's shoes. Depending upon, if real world stuff has happened in this country that is comparable. Well, in this country, in the US, I know some people just call it in the US, but in this world at different times in history. So.
Yeah. And that's the hardest part about any of this stuff, fictional or real world, is, and it's the beauty of this book, is I never thought about this until it affected someone I care about, whether it's a fictional character or someone else, whether it's, I was happy that the Death Star was blown up until I found out that Jude died on it. Or if it is, in Sienna's case, where I think she's obviously, when I'm quoting, she's talking about Sienna, the thing I'm quoting, but Sienna wasn't directly affected until her mom was on the chopping block, and she was too far down the rabbit hole at that time. And it's after that happens that she's starting to lose, this will to live. Like it's crazy.
Because you gotta juggle between which moral authority you're going to, submit to. Is it the authority of the Empire? Is it your own moral authority? Is it the Force? Like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah, and that's exactly what Sienna says, is I have oaths of loyalty to multiple things, but if there's a conflict, you have to decide who you're going to be loyal to. She chose Thane all the time over everything else, but
until the end.
Versus
she wouldn't
her
go
family.
with Thane. Yeah, until the end, she didn't choose Thane because she was too broken down.
Yeah.
And that just hit me like a ton of bricks, and I'm about to cry, but that's fine.
And that scene, to me, signifies her realizing how big of a part she's played in this evil machine and not feeling like she's worth redemption. But Star Wars is a story of redemption. And Thane knows this. Like, yes, come on, just do it. But giving her background and how she feels about honor, her honor is irrevocably tarnished in her own eyes. Like, she has nothing anymore. I don't know. I mean, while we're on the subject, just straight up, just Sienna. Is she a lost cause? Was she evil? I'm just, because I loved her at the start of the book, and then you see more things. And a part that really hit me is when she goes back to the ISB agent, and he's like, "So, was justice served?" I won't say anymore. I'll let you guys kind of talk about it. This one will start with Pep. Just Sienna overall, start to finish.
I think I loved her character throughout the entire book, and that's not to say I loved her decisions, but just the way the character was written in general, just that innocence, that shining beacon of innocence, all the way to her kind of like within her career in the Empire, all the way through her internal struggle between loyalties, and then at the end of her rope, or at the end of the line where she kind of gave up, or was kind of, she relegated herself to just kind of giving her life to the Empire instead of, you know, going through this constant battle that was ravaging her soul. And so I love every inch of every line that was written for Sienna, just because it was so complex and so dynamic that you oftentimes had your own personal feelings about what she should do, but then you were empathetic to why she was doing the things she was doing. And never once did I hate her. Never once did I was I like, oh, that was a stupid decision. I love Claudia Gray because, like, the way she was written is I don't know how many times I'm gonna repeat it in like in different forms, but you're always within that character yourself, and you're always seeing their decisions, and just, you're not judging them. You're understanding everything about that character, and that's what I loved about Sienna's and her struggle.
It's fantastic. And then also, I'll give you another second, because I also want to add a caveat to everyone, because when Sienna was born, she had a twin sister that died a couple hours afterwards. And you know, if the password to get into this was look through my eyes, just the first letters of each one. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
Oh, Jesus.
You know, she's living her life for two people, and I'm curious if your thoughts on how she feels about her, you know, departed sister, how that may play into this, and if that changes anything. So, Pep, if you want to expand, that's cool. If not, we'll...
I'll say a few things and let everyone else speak. I just thought that was a brilliant kind of I wouldn't say like side piece, but it was a brilliant addition to Sienna's character, because throughout the entire book there's this struggle within her, but you often when you're reading, you're often kind of like thinking, is this struggle wholly Sienna's, or is it her sister? Like the small part of her that she's attached to, that braided bracelet that she always held, even though it wasn't regulation. This small part of Sienna that is with her throughout the entirety of the book, onto that, you know, captain's word passphrase. It's like it's a mind-blowing thing to think about that throughout the entirety of the narrative, is whether or not, or how much of her sister still lives within her, and how much of her sister is driving that struggle. Like, come back to me, because I'm looking through your eyes and I don't like what's going on, so come back. And then that's when the struggle happens within Sienna.
Yeah. I think it's important because it was a twin, so that represents herself. If she no longer being true to herself, yeah. But Victoria, if you wouldn't mind going next.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the juxtaposition on the note of her sister, like the juxtaposition between Thane and Sienna, because Thane in a way had an intersection of privilege with financial privilege, but number two, he had the privilege, he lived for himself. And Sienna was always living for others. And so, you know, back to the morality question, when we are living for ourselves, we can make those risky decisions. We can make those decisions where we're like, yeah, this is my morality and my decision. So, you know, we see Thane. But then when Sienna is like, look through my eyes, use me as a vessel. She's a vessel for a lot of people. She's also living for us in a lot of ways. And, you know, that's played out in her service to the Empire, but in her family. And when that cord breaks and she's forced to live with herself, she's also forced to confront her own morality instead of the morality of others or living for others. And so I thought that was really powerful. That was the moment that brought me to tears, because it's like, when you live for yourself, what decision would you make? I guarantee like all of us have something we're living for other than ourselves. But if we only had ourselves left, what decisions would you make differently? And that just like really, it confronted me really haltingly. And so I think that was a really beautiful juxtaposition between Thane and Sienna. But yeah, that's all I gotta say.
Ooh, sorry, what you just said just hit me like a hammer, because all of a sudden 2 thoughts just popped into my mind. One, when Sienna thought she was going to get failed out of the academy with that she was like, okay, well then I guess, because I can't go home, I guess I'll just start a new life. Like, that's always been part of her, of she's still living for her parents at that moment, saying, if this doesn't work out, I can't go home because I would bring shame upon them. And then it also brought me back to, it's like a throwaway moment after Thane and Sienna are fighting and they're separated. And now they're like apart from one another. The teacher is asking them about an opera. Mm-hmm. And Sienna doesn't know about operas, so she can't remember the theme of it. Thane raises his hand and shares the theme. The theme is it's the morality of self-sacrifice and the repression of desire. And the fact that she, like, rereading it and reading that part, I was like, oh damn, they already told us the end. But I digress. So Rids, I'm sorry I gave you so much. We have Sienna as a whole, her being good and bad. We have the introduction of her sister, and all that. What are your thoughts?
I really liked Sienna, but like she was so innocent for like the first half of the book, and then like she slowly turned like still good, like she was still a nice person, but she was like she went to more extreme levels as the Empire grew smaller and smaller. And I loved that I didn't think she'd go that far to like physically like hit Thane or like punch Thane to do what she thought was right. And like and also I thought it was like really like kind of cool and original how she had like the like his sister like looking through her eyes and stuff. And I liked how Thane did it then, because when he thought she was dead. So I think that like tied in with the start of the book a lot. But I don't like why she was friends. Don't like the fact that she was friends with somebody called Barris.
Oh no, I didn't. Frick.
You can never trust those.
Not the same Barris. You don't know what happened to her, right?
we do not. But this same question to Justin.
Oh boy. So talking about that, like this realization came flooding to mind, but I'll answer the broad question. I like her a lot. And like I said, I identified with Thane more. And so like her side of the conflict was always the other side to me, mm-hmm. you know? But I could always sympathize with it, like Pep said. Like I could never call her completely wrong. I could disagree, but I always saw why, you know? And so, and her like, what's the word I'm looking for? Her like drive to be better, to go to the top, when she was the one from humble beginnings, not him, you know? She was from much humbler beginnings. And people, you know, would have said, oh, it's because that late worlder, I forgot what they called it, the second waiver, there we go, second waiver helped you with his fancy ship and stuff. But it was all her hard work, her wit, her determination, you know, and I respect that about her a lot. And then about the, you know, morality thing and the bracelet, it her culture's ties of honor started with family and then moved on to what you were serving. You know, they were there because they chose to serve a king that got exiled, so they got exiled. You know, and that's like the baseline. But family is always first, because when your family gets accused of something, you have to stand by. And they established that early. Something happened, and she was standing by and was going to be late to flying practice if someone didn't take her post, right? And they established early on that the Empire wanted you to cut ties with where you're from. They wanted you to become the Empire's your new family now. And that's how machines like the Empire get good people to do bad things. They take away your humanity at the end of the day, you know? And with that situation you mentioned where, you know, was justice served? And she had to say yes, because her dad told her to, if I remember correctly. Yeah. That family tie that's more important than anything, one of those got cut right there. She cut it. And Thane, she had a familiar tie to them because she was in love with him, you know. And so many cultures, so many religions say when you like come together like that, you're one, you know. And the book definitely said they acted like one, especially when they were flying together. And the bracelet was another family tie that she broke the rules. She didn't break any rules. She was a perfect Imperial. She broke the rules to have that bracelet. And when she got in that wreck, this, like when we were talking about this, I remembered when she got in that wreck, they took it away. And that was the Empire taking away that last family tie from her. And that's why she got so broken. That was one of the reasons she got so broken down near the end of the book and lost the will to live. But then Thane was that last tie. And he knew that I'm going to cry. Anyway, I told myself I wouldn't cry, but whatever. He knew that even taking that bracelet away, like it may have cut the tie, but there was a string left. And she made her password look through my eyes because she was still in there and those family bonds were still there and that bond with him was still there. And because of their bond, he knew about that phrase. The only other person, I think, no one else would she tell about that. And that's what saved her at the end of the day, that last everlasting tie with Thane, you know, that he wouldn't let go of her. And, you know, sorry, that's me. I'm going to cry now. No, that's someone else can talk.
It's powerful because it really goes to say that to be part of the Empire, they know that they have to drown every part of you that is you so that only your devotion to them is left.
And they were successful with
most of them.
With I forgot his first name. Windwider.
Nash. Yeah.
Nash. They were successful with Nash and not successful with her. He was a dark mirror, you know, because they took everything from him. And that could have been her. And she could have been Nash if it was her planet that got blown up.
Dang.
Yeah.
Whew. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's layers. Brooke?
To echo what a lot of people have said already, I think Ciena's definition of honor and how she grew up viewing it definitely drove her choices and how her story went. I think it really started with kind of the promise she made to her sister, that she would always like live her life, like kind of like Victoria said, for other people, like for her family, for her sister. So I think that kind of drove her through her story in the Empire, and I think kind of helped her, I guess, to justify what the Empire was doing, because I don't think she was blind to it. I think she recognized that things were not always good, but because of her ties to her honor, she could justify it in that way, that she didn't want to feel like a failure if she were to leave or disagree with something that was done. And then we see, like in the very end, I feel like she's just been like worn down by not only the Empire, but also just by like her own like inner turmoil of, I have to stay with this no matter what, because that is like what my honor is telling me to do. Otherwise I'm a failure, which I thought was really powerful. And even like growing up, it was clear that her and Thane grew up very differently. So I'm sure oftentimes Ciena and her family didn't have anything but their honor, with their pride in themselves and their planet that they lived on. So I really think that just drives her whole character. And then kind of a similar note, but a little different, it just made me think of when we were talking about her sister, since she had that bracelet, was like her one little defiance against the Empire. I think that also kept her from like totally siding with Thane or deserting and joining Thane. I feel like we saw the idea that like the Force was constantly bringing them together, but I also think that she was more like pushing against it than he was. So I feel like she had more of a promise to her sister as being like her sister is already her other half rather than Thane being her other half. So I think that also kind of kept her like the walls up between them at times.
Yeah. Awesome. And Ted?
Yeah, I think her like narrative, like path, and what happened like with her character, it doesn't like completely mirror, but it's sort of not the opposite. It resembles Anakin as like how far can you go before you can make that decision about like when can I just turn around and like it's never too late, as what like Vader proved, but in the back of your head of every decision you've ever made has been what you wanted to do, and then suddenly you've got that decision where you might be in the wrong. It can't be an easy thing to sort of admit in your head and go back and make the decision. And I think back in her mind, like the bracelet was the one thing that kept her from not becoming fully this person. That I don't think she was truly was that person. But yeah, I think that really emphasizes like her path and what she needed to do in what I see it as, not as like a choice, but what she sort of had to become.
Oh, that's really good. And it hits me because it's it feels like the moral is it's never too late to make the right decision, and that's Anakin making the wrong decision and eventually being like, oh, well, I guess this is my life now. Was not a proper reaction. And we see that in Vader talking to Luke in Return of the Jedi when he's saying, it's too late for me, son. But it wasn't. It's not too late. It's never too late. Connor?
Yeah, going off what Ted said, I was also thinking of the parallels between like that the bracelet and like see through my eyes. And early in the conversation, I forget who said it, but it's almost like her seeing her sister was like kept pulling her back to the light and not falling as deep as she could. And it really reminded me of Vader always having that little part of Anakin still in him that won't let him fully commit. But then as opposed to Vader, the Empire took that bracelet away and stripped her completely of her kind of like tied to the light until Thane came back. But yeah, so Cyan is such a complex character, but it's so understandable that you understand every decision that she makes. You understand why she's making it, even though I disagreed with it, because you're in your head, you're like, oh, like you're on the bad guy's side. You know what I mean? But you understand it, which is props to Claudia Gray.
Yeah, you constantly want to roll up a newspaper and be like, no, saying it, like stop
Right.
it. And Liz, your thoughts on it?
It really hit me hard when they had that element of her sister. I have a twin sister, so it just gutted me to read about that. I think it really, to echo what a lot of people have said, it really focuses on people's attachments and how they can make them either stray from a preset morality that they had for good. For example, Anakin turning to the dark side to save Padme, but also to the light. It's kind of that parallel with Sienna has this really what seems like an uncompromising morality system, but she breaks it for Thane, and just how these characters can be swayed by how strong their relationships are. I thought that was really great that they brought that element in, and really echoes a lot of kind of the main arcs of the original films.
Yeah, absolutely. Whew. All right. And man, also another thing, I don't know if anyone has had the chance to do it yet. I know Rids, you started it, but if you get a chance to rewatch the original trilogy now after reading the book, it hits different. I'm telling you, it hits different. I want to thank everyone for joining me. Before we kind of end things, personally, my view on this is a big moral of the story is the question: can you be loyal to multiple things at the same time? Right? I don't necessarily view the bracelet as defiance to the Empire. I treat that as her highest priority loyalty. And just like she says, you can be loyal to multiple things, but if they conflict, you have to make a choice. Well, what happens if they are headed in diametrically opposed directions? What happens then? And to me, that's the core. But I kind of want to actually close all of my windows just now. But I want to come back through, hit everyone, and kind of get this final question of it's a few parts, right? One, your overall thoughts, like what did I miss that you think is important to know, and what do you guys think of as the theme of the book? And if this one, I'm going to start with Ridian.
Well, I think like I wouldn't really like. I couldn't really say a theme for it because it's all a lot. It's like all over the place. There's like it's like loads of different genres in one, or like theme, and it's like there's like I think I like how like it's like kind of like somebody said earlier, like a behind the scenes to the original trilogy, and it's like I didn't know that like citizens of the Empire thought that the Empire was a good thing. And I thought they all thought it was bad until I started reading the book, and I think it's kind of like adds a whole new view to how like you said, like how you watch the original trilogy, and like you see like maybe like a stormtrooper dying, and you just think like that guy could have been a good guy, or something. And yeah, like you kind of like feel a bit of emotion when like anybody on the dark or the light side dies, and yeah.
I mean, like when you fight stormtroopers, they're all seemingly replaceable, so you don't care if a stormtrooper dies because to you it's not a person. They're all a concept, right? But each stormtrooper is a person, just like Thane or Sienna or Jude or Nash or anyone, and it's crazy. Victoria, final thoughts?
I think there's lots of layers of a theme, so I don't think there's one theme, which is actually kind of a cool theme because it's like there's one of the themes here, in my opinion, is gray area. So I think gray area. So empathy. I think that's what I took most from this book was empathy, and how, I don't know, like the idea of lost stars, like we are guided by stars, like there's like maps of, like we're guided by them. And just the idea of lost stars being like that lost moral compass, like what is the what is our loyalty? What are we being loyal to? Say loyalty, empathy, and the gray area of those intersections. But yeah, I really loved this book. Thank you for like providing this platform for us to chat about it. But those are kind of my final thoughts. So thanks so much for everything. This is great.
I'm so glad that we get to do this. It makes me so happy. But Pep, your thoughts on it?
The biggest thing that I got from this book was the very fine distinction, but important distinction between loyalty to friends, family, and each other versus loyalty and especially fealty to an idea or to an abstract thought. It's very dangerous, and so I want to give everyone a lot more time to speak their own piece, but I guess ultimately the theme of the book for me brings me back to Bruce Lee, and it's always be water. Never, hunker down and just be one thing, because your priorities will always shift, your loyalties will always change, but as long as you're able to adapt and take any form that any given situation will kind of rattle or make you take the form of, it's in the end probably the best thing to do than to just kind of adhere to one single construct as your kind of pillar.
Yeah. Whew. And Liz?
I'm really mad because I was going to say loyalty, and I don't think I can explain it as well as that. But yeah, I think it does a really great job of illustrating just how you can become so entrenched within a system, how quickly you can adapt your identity to an organization. And I think it ties back to that. I think I was interestingly described as flexibility to, if you're thinking about, for example, the network of people you owe something to, it's much harder to take a look around at the systems you're complicit in and really critically think, am I propping up something that really harms other people?
Yeah, it's... Whew. Sorry, just each one is just like hitting me. Connor?
Yeah, I also, for the theme, took away a lot of empathy and just that there's two sides to every story, at least two sides to every story. And you have to be kind of conscious that everyone has their own reasons for being the way that they are. And you might not understand those reasons or agree with them, but there are reasons. And another thing I wanted to mention was that for like a young adult novel, as this book is, they go into a lot of like deep concepts and tough concepts, talking about Thane and how his father was abusive to him. I thought this was a really good read, and it's my favorite Star Wars book. I haven't read that many, but I think I've read three. I'm on my fourth Star Wars book, but yeah, this is by far my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah, and so for me at least, this book was slept on because of the young adult title. There's two books that came out before The Force Awakens, this and the Aftermath trilogy. I do really love the Aftermath trilogy. The first book is hard to read. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But no, I slept on this because of the young adult thing, and I regret it. You know what I mean? Like, I know I love it as well. But Ted, your closing thoughts, if there's anything I missed, and the overall theme.
I'd say that I'm impressed from the first Star Wars book I've ever read, and quite a good starting point to see how much emotional depth within like a world and universe that I already love can be found in like books and the audio books and stuff. So I loved it, and I'm just excited to see what else I can read and how much else I can sort of access through what you've given us.
Yeah, you've taken your first steps. And that's one of the things, you know, because I get asked like, hey, how do you know so much Star Wars stuff? It's because I read a bunch of these books. Most of the ones I do are audiobooks, to be honest. And people are like, well, why? It's not to get information. It's because they're amazing. And then after you go through a lot of them, people ask questions. And you're like, oh yeah, I know the answer to that. That's in this thing over here, you know. And I recommend everyone does it, and it's beautiful. You have something to add, Pep?
So much Star Wars out there. Like whenever I speak to someone about, you know, the Disney era, I'm just, there's so much Star Wars. Like even the kind of like the argument of, you know, you shouldn't read books to enjoy the movies, and I, you know, fundamentally would agree with that statement. But if you want to enjoy Star Wars, read the books, read the comics. That's more Star Wars for you. Like, just not in the effort to get you to like the sequels or get you to like any one movie. Read the books. You're going to enjoy Star Wars. You're going to get so much more Star Wars out of it.
Yeah. And that's why one of my biggest recommendations is the Revenge of the Sith novelization. And a lot of people are like, oh, I already love it. It's my favorite movie. I'm like, read the novelization. It times it by 3 or 4, you know, like,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you like it or don't like it. If it makes it better, add it. It's seasoning to your meal. It's seasoning to your Star Wars meal.
And really quick, that's what makes Star Wars special. It's not the SWCU, you know, it's not the Star Wars Cinematic Universe. It's always been a universe. Even back when it was made, it's been a universe full of comics, books, cartoons, and, you know, with everything adding on to each other, it's never been just the movies, you know. And if you really want to get into it, there's so much you can just consume, and almost all of it's good, you know.
Yeah.
And even the stuff that's not so good is still better than most things.
That's very true. Yeah, Brooke, final thoughts, things I've missed, and the overall theme.
Yeah, I really, really liked this. I think it was such a great start to my Star Wars novel journey. I definitely took a lot of empathy away as far as themes, as well as I think Connor said it, that there's always 2 sides to every story. So it really made you think about, at least, yeah, it makes you think like 2 people can see the exact same thing and have completely different perceptions of it, which is probably why I also love The Last Jedi, because that touches on that a whole lot. Yeah, I think I just like how it kind of humanizes the people involved, because there's like, from the originals, there's like the legacy or the legend of the Skywalkers, but then you pull the curtain back and see like all of the other people that have, you know, absolutely no personal ties to the core of the story, but still like believe in what they're doing.
Yeah. And that's one of the many reasons I can't wait till the podcast gets to The Last Jedi and I can get you on it, Brooke. Oh my God, it's going to be the best day. Hopefully Pep can join us too, but that's in the future. Last but certainly not least, Justin, you want to take us out? Things that the themes, things I may have missed, or things you want to add?
As far as, you know, things we didn't touch on, you know, I wish we could be here all day, because, you know, we dived into Sienna. I'd love to dive into Thane, because like I said, I identified with him in his story, and like Connor brought up, he, you know, overcame a lot, and it was, you know. But as far as the overall theme, I agree with Victoria. I can't narrow it down to one, because this book at the end of the day told at least 3 stories. It told her story, it told his story, and it told their story. Her story, I agree with all of you. It's about loyalty, and it's about where those loyalties lie and what that means. His story, Thane kind of went on a hero's journey, you know, when you think about it. And even without Sienna there, he would have gone on this hero's journey. There could have been a book about him, a guy that trains to be an Imperial pilot, and then when Alderaan blows up and he sees some slavery, goes and joins the rebellion, and it would have been an interesting book. You know, probably it would have had some action in it. It would have had an interesting, likable main character. But then, so I guess his story is about doing the right thing, and then their story, and maybe if you know, threatened me and made me pick one, their story is about love. You know, it's a romance at the end of the day, and how that love overcame all odds, brought them together through the middle of a war, and saved her life, technically saved his too, you know. And it was just a beautiful read. So emotional, so empathetic. Empathy was a word thrown around, and I think it's a really good one. Yeah, and I think I could pontificate a little more, but I think that sums it up.
Oh, awesome. I gotta say, you know, from this and like doing the podcast, this has been my favorite discussion so far by a lot, because it's like,
thank you.
I don't know, there's so much like meat in it, you know what I mean? Like, whew, you
It's
know,
like the book.
Yeah.
Several perspectives. You got to get those takes, those hot takes.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for joining me and talking about this book. I really do love it, and I think that you know, like you said, there's so much more to this universe, and it's so interesting and fascinating, and it's applicable to our daily lives while being entertaining and everything that we want. So once again, I do want to thank everyone, and man,
Thank you
sorry,
for doing this.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining me. Not gonna lie, Justin, you kind of broke my brain there, and you and Victoria, where now I'm trying to talk, but my mind is thinking how many different stories this tells and exactly what those are. But that's what makes this universe beautiful, and that's what makes life beautiful. Is every single person you meet, you know, all 9 of you here on talking here have your own story, and we're all together right now. It's not one person's story, it's all of our stories, and I'm sure they're all fascinating. So love you guys, thank you so much for joining, and may the force be with all of us.
Thank you so much for hosting. Facilitating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So that's where I'm going to stop the recording. But just like I said, awesome. I love it. It's just made my
I have a
week.
super tiny thing I want to add. There was no good part, but his Twi'lek friend, can we get more Twi'leks with splotches on their skin? Because he had like star-shaped splotches in his design. It's in the manga. It's really cool.
That's a good point. You know, I'm gonna need to find the manga and post some pictures of it. If you guys haven't seen, Justin posted a couple pictures from the manga already, and it is.
I'll check it out.
It's the cutest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. They make some changes I don't appreciate. They don't really go into either of their relationships with their parents. Sienna actually like tries to kill him when she meets him again, when she realizes he's in the rebellion, which like kind of goes against the themes, I think. But you know,
I was just reading the chat. Forgot to say this, but I hope she's in another book and is evil and kills Thane.
Yeah, that would be an interesting. That's a curiosity I have that I wish like it probably would have gone on too long. But think of all the what ifs. What if they had listened to Jude's email that she sent out, where she was like, there's this part in the Death Star that I think they could blow up if they wanted to.
Yeah.
You know what?
The hubris of the Empire at that point.
Actually, that leads me to another question that I do want to ask everyone. Would you want a sequel? Yes or no? And and why?
Because it doesn't end. They're not together and they don't have babies. And that's what
it
I
literally
wanted,
ends with Nash like rebuilding, right?
Yeah.
And I even mentioned that final scene of Nash being like, I will avenge you.
Yeah,
and whether or not, I mean, is Nash going to show up in the Squadrons game?
I hope
Yeah,
so.
I don't
Could
know.
be.
And the Alphabet Squadron book is that time period too. God, there's so many possibilities. But yeah,
I'm gonna say
real.
no.
All right. Actually, I'll start with Victoria. I want to hear everyone's independent thoughts. But Victoria, do you want a sequel? Yes or no,
So-
and why?
I would say no. And the reason I'm going to say no is because, okay, Nash, for instance, he says, I will avenge you. And it's and so I guess, I don't know, we think we're doing something in the name of something we love, but we see that was futile. Like, that was like, why are you avenging her? You don't need to avenge her. Like, she's alive, this and that. And so I like that cliffhanger theme of like, you think that you're doing something for a reason, but it's not. And I don't know, I like that open-endedness of everything. I am a fan of open-endedness just in general. And so I don't think I would like a sequel just because I don't want, I don't know, I don't want the ends to be closed. Yeah.
And Ridian, would you want a sequel? I know you do, but
Yeah.
explain it.
I definitely want a sequel, and I think it'd be good to like really, like this book was a lot of it's like really unpredictable, and I think it'd be better to like take the sequel to a whole new level of unpredictableness, like what I said in the chat, like maybe.
Yeah.
It could add another layer. I don't know.
Definitely could. Connor, you want a sequel?
I don't want a sequel. I think it might just be in my head that how the story ends is that Thane like pulls some strings. She's apologetic for like she realizes all she's done, and then they just kind of live happily ever after. That's what's in my head. I don't know if I want that ruined.
That's good.
I do. I want it ruined.
And Liz, do you want a sequel?
I'd love a cameo, but I feel like it'd be really tough to follow these characters moving forward. What with position she's in and having to grapple with a lifetime of Imperial service, I think it'd be really difficult to draw that out, and I think it'd be tough to read. But I love these characters, so somebody might be able to do it really, really well.
Justin, you want a sequel?
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with Victoria and Connor because my brain is like, yeah, you know, but then my heart has a child inside and it wants more, you know. But it's you know, it's easy to figure out what happens next. They probably wind up together. You know, that's the whole point of the book, like I said. Like their bond couldn't be broken by a massive fascist machine and a war, you know. So, but maybe if there was a sequel, it'd be about someone else in that circle. Like it would be about Nash and
Logara.
I forgot her friend,
Nash.
guy.
No, but I can see it going forward with Nash and Kindy specifically.
Kindy, yeah, and they you know, Kindy probably still serves the New Republic, and you know, Thane and Sienna would be there, and so we'd get to find out what happens to them, but it could tell a different story because, you know, the open-endedness left me a little dry. It left me like, no, but I want them to, you know, I wanted them to kiss lovingly, and then the screen, and then it's yeah. but you know, I get that it had its merits. Like, you know, now it can go, because every story in this galaxy can't be contained in one thing. You know, that's why we have an anthology.
Yeah. And Brooke, sequel or nah?
I'm gonna say no, like a hard no, and I'm gonna compare it to this. The series finale of Breaking Bad was beautiful, and I didn't need any more. If people have seen Breaking Bad, the way it ends is great. And then we got El Camino, which was fun, but I feel like I didn't need it. I didn't need to see what happens after the end. Like I like to imagine that myself. I didn't need to see it.
And then Ted, sequel or nah?
I'd take a sequel. I mean, I'm not like yearning to see what happens next, and I was really satisfied with the ending. But I don't know. I think I wouldn't mind if they did like make one and it was like actually going to happen. But then like I wouldn't be too bothered if they just said if that is it, because it was like everything I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay. And then I don't need a sequel because I know their love will never be broken. That's not a question to me. And that's where we end is, yeah, she's going down for war crimes, but their love will never be broken. And then so that's my original stance, and I stick with it. I did waver a bit once getting into more books like Alphabet Squadron and the other book series that I was talking Aftermath, because we find out, as well as Battlefront 2, because we find out about Operation Cinder, and then there's a bunch of people after that are defecting. And basically, like, because Operation Cinder was the Empire saying, screw this galaxy. I'm going to burn it down if you don't let me win. I'm going to take my ball and go home. And so people are defecting at a rapid rate. And the amount of respect you get is determined by how soon after Operation Cinder started that you defected. So I would love to see, I don't want a sequel, but like someone else said, I would love a cameo, because I could see them needing pilots or needing people that have that information serving in a different sort. And maybe we find out that she served her time and they had a kid later or whatever in the context of another story about the New Republic forming or whatnot. But that's just me.
I mean, I'm pretty satisfied with the book alone. You know, I think the chapter of this story is closed on them. But I've been clamoring for it in the Discord. We need a BSI show, and that show could include Thane, Ciena, Logara, all of those people from the books, and just show up in the way that Clone Wars people showed up in Rebels, you know? Just have those cameos, have those kind of micro arcs within episodes where they're there and they're just like, oh, look, they're alive. They're together. They have a baby.
Yeah. I would be happy with if there's a show like that and then there's some young upstart who has like blondish hair, dark skin, and their last name's Carell. I would lose it. I would be yes.
Yeah, dope. Like there's a new Kyrell in the new Jedi Order. That's
listen, don't. Oh, they had a kid and they were force sensitive.
Padawan Kyrell.
Anyways, once again, I'm sorry to go off on another tangent because I meant to end things before, but
I could talk
love
about
you
this
guys.
for hours. Yeah.
Thank you for talking about this with me and not making me be alone as a solo Uber nerd.
I thank you for doing this because for the longest time, I've been trying to get people to read, and people have been commenting on my videos. What should I read? What should I read? So when you started this, I was like, thank God. Thank God.
Someone asked me that question. It felt good.
Yeah.
It's like, if you like Clone Wars, read Ahsoka. If you like the OT, read Lost Stars. If you like Star Wars, read Lost Stars. But you know.